sits on the Texas Supreme Court. Prior to this, he was on the 14th Court of Appeals from 2012 to 2018. He's got quite a bit of experience as an appellate litigator, and also he was a law clerk at the U.S. Supreme Court. He attended Columbia Law and received his undergraduate at Duke University. Justice Busby is married to his wife Erin, who also served as a clerk on the U.S. Supreme Court, and they have 2 children. Justice Busby, good to see you again, sir.
Thank you for having me.
I heard a report that you got to spend some time with U.S. Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch yesterday.
Yes, sir. I was honored to be appointed by Governor Abbott to the Texas Supreme Court back in February and was confirmed by the Senate in March and started my work then. But our tradition at the Supreme Court is to have a formal investiture ceremony later, and so I was very honored that Associate Justice Neil Gorsuch from the Supreme Court of the United States came to do the ceremonial oath for me yesterday in the Texas House Chamber, and so he was with us for that.
Excellent. As a licensed attorney in the state of Texas, I will continue to be ethical and not ask you any questions, obviously, about any pending litigation or anything that we think might work its way up to the court specifically. But I do want to start off with letting you tell us a little bit about the structure of the Texas Supreme Court and how that plays into things. You know, sometimes people don't understand the difference between state law and federal law, or state court and federal court. So tell us a little bit about the structure of the court, the timelines, and all those things that are related to the function of your job.
Yeah, sure, I'd be glad to. So in Texas, we have a little bit more complicated court structure than some states do. And so depending on the level of money at stake in your case, if it's a civil case or if it's a criminal case, how severe the crime is that's being committed, that will govern what sort of trial court the case will go to. And you know, you hear a lot in the news about the litigation that's in federal court, and there's very important cases there, but the truth is that the workhorses of the judicial and the legal system in the United States are the state courts. Over 90% of the litigation is handled in state courts, so it's very important who your judges are that are on those courts, and we elect all our judges in Texas on every 2 years. There will be judges up. Some judges have 4-year terms, some have 6. But those are races to pay attention to, because there's nobody that can have a greater impact on your life, your liberty, or your property than a judge if you end up in court. So the case starts out in the trial court, and it may be heard by a jury, or it may not if it's really so clear in the case that there's not any dispute for a jury to decide, then the judge can decide it as a legal matter. And if one party doesn't agree with the outcome in the trial court, then they can appeal to one of our courts of appeals, and they're regional. We have 14 of them around the state. I was on the 14th Court of Appeals in Houston, which handled a 10-county region appeals from all of those cases before I was on the Supreme Court. And those courts have to take your case, and they have to write an opinion explaining why they agree or disagree with the arguments that you've made about why the lower court got it, or the trial court or the jury got it wrong or right in the case. And then if somebody still disagrees with that, if it's a civil case, then they can come to us on the Supreme Court of Texas. If it's a criminal case, we have a separate high court, and we're one of only 2 states that does it this way, but we have a separate high court called the Court of Criminal Appeals that's like our Supreme Court for criminal cases. So our court only hears civil cases. One of my former colleagues describes those kind of cases as broken bones and broken promises. But it's all different kinds of cases, from family law, civil litigation, wills, trusts and estates. Juveniles who commit crimes are actually run through the civil system. So we hear all different kinds of cases: torts, contracts, religious liberty issues, all different kinds of litigation. And you were asking about, and so if a case comes to us, we get to choose whether to hear it. The parties file a petition, and we get about 1,100 petitions a year. And out of that, we hear about 100 cases a year. So we're looking for the most important cases all across the state, maybe issues that have divided the different courts of appeals around the state, or where there are really important rights at stake, or there's some uncertainty in the law that the Supreme Court really needs to step in and correct. So we then agree to hear those cases and write decisions in those cases that clarify the law for the whole state. And as far as the difference between state and federal law, there are some areas of overlap, but again, most cases are handled in the state courts, And so, we do have religious freedom laws in Texas, for example, just like the federal government does as well, but you can sue. We have one law that has been litigated a fair amount in the Texas state courts is the Texas Religious Freedom Restoration Act that our legislature passed a few years ago, and we've had some litigation on that in our court. And so there are state laws that protect individual rights that people can then come into state court and sue on those based on those laws. You can also sue on federal laws in state court. We can hear both state and cases based on both state and federal law. So if you can bring a claim based on the U.S. Constitution or Texas constitutional laws or federal laws in a state court. It's the federal courts that are of limited jurisdiction. They can only hear cases that are based on federal law, or if there are cases involving people from two different states. So the state trial courts are the workhorses of the judiciary in this country, and it's a real honor for me to have a chance to serve on the Texas Supreme Court.
Well, and a lot of times people think, you can take your case to the Texas Supreme Court and, there's always a chance maybe you can win there, and it's not automatic. It's actually very difficult. A very small number of cases that seek that request that actually get taken up and decided. And so that does, we could argue as to the importance of that role, but I think a lot of times people aren't aware of it, but something for people to note when it becomes, you deal with some of these issues. And we worked on some of those issues with the Texas Supreme Court. It's very high-level work, and it's very interesting to see some of the steps just to get the Texas Supreme Court to take your case. A very small amount of cases.